What's up, everybody? It's Brandon Locaron here, and today I want to talk more about the BRRRR strategy. So, we're going to take a deeper dive into the rehab process and what that looks like for buying a BRRRR and rehabbing it. So, just a reminder, BRRRR stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, and it's a method of real estate investing where seasoned investors or people that really understand the real estate market and construction costs could get into a property and not have any money left in the deal within about 6 months or so. So without further ado, let's take a deeper dive into rehabbing a BRRRR and what it takes in that process. Um, so one of the things that, like we talked about last week was essentially when we buy it, we want to use a contractor that we know, like, and trust who could actually help us come up with ROM numbers to figure out, hey, look, this deal is going to cost X amount. If you need to redo the kitchen, this is how much we're looking at. If we need to redo the bathroom, this is what we're looking at, right? And one of the things too that I highly recommend as an investor, whether you're doing a BRRRR strategy, flip, whatever you're doing, you should get really well educated on how to rehab a house or how to rehab a building, because these things are really important, especially when you're talking to contractors. You don't want them to tell you, hey, look, like the sewer needs to be replaced, sewer drain needs to be replaced. And in reality, it doesn't have to be, right? You can ask questions like, well, could we snake it and then we can get out of it, right? Is there something that the county can pay for, right? So these are all things that when you're rehabbing a project, you kind of want to have some sort of understanding of how to do it or how it goes together. You may not have to have done it before, but at least you have a better idea, so you can kind of challenge and ask questions where you're forcing them to come up with extra, saving you money instead of having to spend money, right? An example is like when we did one of our BRRRRs, one of our first BRRRRs, like we actually discovered that the faucet system in the house was used, like we like Delta products, right? Because I think they're super reliable. I think they look good and whatnot. Well, I found a brand on Amazon called Peerless, and it used a Delta, like, mixing valve, and it uses a Delta, valves, like, so internals. But this trim kit was only $60, and obviously the Delta internals were $50 or whatever they were, and I was able to save a ton of money versus buying a $200 faucet from Delta directly, and know that, hey, look, like the internals are still Delta. It's technically a Delta faucet. And those are some of the things that we picked up on, like when we're doing the rehab on the project, and my wife was able to find out, like, hey, this works well with this, or hey, we should go with these lights on Amazon, or whatever the situation might be. Because the other thing too is, like, when you're doing these BRRRRs, you're gonna realize, like, hey, look, like some of these light fixtures actually comes with bulbs, and I feel like, I don't know about you, but where you buy light bulbs at or where you buy light fixtures at, but most of them that I buy, like, they do not come with bulbs. You got to buy those like separately. It's like batteries not included, bulbs not included, right? So jumping into the rehab, like, one of the things that you want to think about is, like, you want to make this property livable and a good rental, right? So when I say that, what I mean is, like, essentially, like, you want to make sure that, hey, if you had to put your family there, if you had to live there, you're fine with living there, right? Because you don't want to cut corners and only to realize, like, you have to go back later on and fix problems. You want to make sure that the property is, like, ready to go and that you're not going to have any issues, like, moving forward, right? So one of the things that, like, one of the things that I do when we buy properties is, like, hey, look, like, there's something called cabin grade hardwood floors, and it's real hardwood floors that a company in Kentucky or North Carolina packages up, and then they sell. Because, so, like, when you have like Bruce or Mohawk or one of these high end, like, companies that sell hardwood floors, like, there's a QC process, right? So, like, if something doesn't fit through their QC line or the color is a little bit off, what they'll do is, like, they'll kick it to the side, right? Like, so their QC machine is just like kicking it to the side, kicking it to the side. Hey, this doesn't fit, this doesn't fit, or hey, maybe this is a little too distressed, it doesn't fit the box, or whatever. Well, a company in Kentucky and North Carolina, they actually buy this product from these larger hardwood floor company, packages it up in like an unlabeled box, and then they sell it for like $1.79 a square foot, to depending on the type of floor that you're looking for. It's like really cheap, right? And I paid our guys like $2 a square foot to install. So I had hardwood floors in our property for like less than $5 a square foot, and good carpet costs $5 a square foot. So when you think about things like that, you're gonna increase the property, you're gonna make it more livable, and you're gonna make it a really good rental, because then people are gonna be like, oh man, like these people really took good care, and they like really knew what they were doing when they were doing this thing together, because like they thought about putting hardwood in here, and like I want to have them as landlords, right? Because like you as a renter, you're gonna be like, man, like these people are super cool, they're like putting hardwood in their rental, like that's awesome, like I know they're gonna take good care of it, and like you're gonna also attract like a higher end clientele that knows how to take care of these things, right? So that's when I say is make it a good and livable rental. Next thing is like, that kind of like leads us into like, how can you increase value, right? So one of the things in the process is like, you're going to have the cash out refinance and this BRRRR strategy, right? So I always think about like, how can I increase value to the appraiser's eye without having to like break the bank, right? So again, using the hardwood floors and getting the cabin grade hardwood floors. I don't remember the website. Oh, the website is called reallycheapfloors.com. And it's like solid hardwood. It's like real oak. It's so cool. And then like, figuring out things like the faucets, figuring out things like, buying light fixtures from Amazon, because a light fixture is just a light fixture. Pretty much all the internals are the same. It's just wires and like glass and whatever, right? Just metal, right? And you're going to think of ways like, hey, like, okay, is it worth it like keeping this deck here? Is it worth it putting grass in? Is it worth it like, how can I make this property like appeal to an appraiser as well as as a renter, right? So again, like you want to do things that don't break the bank, right? And my thing is like you don't want to like do things where it's like over the top as well, over the top for the neighborhood. Because then you won't get that money back, right? Like, so if a neighborhood has like, porcelain tile in all of the high end properties, and you don't want to go in there and put marble in, because like you're not going to get the money back for that marble, right? But same goes for the bottom side of things. You don't want to go in and put like laminate, like, because like you're going to get the lower end of that value for that property in an appraiser's eyes, right? So that's like one of the things that like, I think about. The other thing is having a good contractor. And you want to make sure that you have someone that you, again, know, like, and trust, because they're the ones that are going to actually help you during the deal and help you during the process. And you don't want one where it's like, hey, like, I'll finish the job next week. And then next week it's like, oh, yeah, I said next week, and it just keeps going, right? Because every time they delay, it's costing you money. It's funny, like, one of my cabinet guy, Eric, he says, like, I went through an issue in our house here where like the drywall guys really messed up, and like, full disclosure, I went cheap, right? I was like, all right, it's drywall. It shouldn't be any problem, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyways, like they completely messed it up. Like for whatever reason, I don't know, like, but they messed it up. And one of the things he told me when he came to install the cabinets, he was like, Brandon, he's like, cry once, don't cry twice. And what he meant by that, I was like, first of all, I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? He's like, look, he's like, just pay the money up front for a good guy and get it done once. And then that way you don't cry twice, because the first guy's going to mess it up. You're going to give him a bunch of money, and then you're going to have to hire the good guy anyways, right? So it actually saves you money and time and maybe some gray hair too, right? At least for me. So, so cry once. That's my advice to you guys. Hire a good contractor. They're not going to be the cheapest. Don't go after the cheapest contractor, because like you get what you pay for, kind of thing, right? And you want to have someone that's like showed like a good reputation of maintaining the schedule, has like a really good control, and has like a good control and a schedule of their subcontractors. Like I know Ricardo, who like I'm partner with on his company, is like, we do a site meeting with the client. He does a site meeting with the client when we do a project with all of the subcontractors. And that was something that I picked up during commercial construction when I used to work at TSI. Like, you have a subcontractor meeting, and that way, like, each subcontractor knows, like, okay, flooring guy is going in. So after flooring guy, then the painters can go. After the painters go, then the finishes can be installed, like faucets and light fixtures and whatever. After they're done, then we're gonna have final cleaning, like that kind of thing. Like that's the level of detail you want from a good contractor, and they will have that. They will have the tools. They will have the knowledge, the wherewithal to like be able to tell you, hey, look, in 2 days, like I have the flooring guy coming in, and guess what? Like you guys cannot walk on the floor for at least a week. So get everything done by this date, right? He's gonna be able to control and manage the subs by then. So again, cry once and essentially like hire a good contractor. The next thing is like documentation, right? So like I talked about with the cabin grade hardwood floors, like reallycheapfloors.com, knowing that Peerless uses Delta internals, like knowing where you got these light fixtures from, like document every single thing, including your contracts, including the cost that you spent. Because like some things you might go over on, right? Like some things you might be like, oh snap, like I went a little too much on, I don't know, landscaping, right? But you were under budget on cabinets, right? So document all these things, because like the more you do this BRRRR strategy, the better it is going to become more like a machine for you, and or even your flip. So you're going to be like, hey, look, we get tile from this place, we get light fixtures from this place, we use this contractor, whatever it may be. Like that's what you do. So then it's just like, hey, I've got a process from A to Z, right? So you just roll out your plan on the next project and you can hit the ground running. So you're going to notice that as you do more and more of these, you're going to go from like taking you 3 months to renovate a project and get a renter in there, to maybe, like 6 months, or from 6 months to 3 months, from 3 months to 2 months, from 2 months to 1 month, right? And like you're going to be able to do that. And the more you're able to do that, then the less money you spend on financing costs of like actually like, having issues, right? So that's just one of the things that I recommend. Document everything. Next step is property condition, right? So when you do your first walkthrough, like you're essentially looking for a really messed up property, right? Like something that needs a ton of work, but the structurals are good. And the reason for that is because like most people, when they smell a bad property, like I've been into some really smelly properties, by the way, and like they jump in and are like, man, this is too bad, we'll walk away, right? So you're looking for those things that where it's good bones, and it just needs a facelift, if you will. One of my field superintendents used to say like lipstick on the pig, literally like lipstick on the pig on this property, or whatever it might be, right? And I don't mean like don't cut corners, like ever, don't ever cut corners. But like you do want to make it sure that like you're making it look good and the internals are good. And again, you want to do things that increase your ROI. So increasing your return on investment is really important. Like I said, the reason why I do hardwood floors is, one, it helps the appraisal process, and two, like let's say like the tenant moves out and my tenant like destroyed the floors for whatever reason, like what you could do is just resand those floors and they look just as new, right? Versus like carpet, where I have to go back in and replace carpet every like every tenant or every 5 years or whatever. It costs me like $3 or $4 a square foot for carpet, right? So versus hardwood floors, I could spend $2 a square foot to sand and finish it, right? Plus hardwood floors is one of those things where over time, like you could it kind of gets better and it looks better over time, especially when you get like like thin hardwood floors, like 2 3/4 or 2 1/4, whatever it might be. So that's just one of the things that I recommend. Some of the things where we actually messed up is like we kind of went like a little like too fancy on like the towel hangers in the bathrooms on one of our properties. So like the renter kind of destroyed them, and like it didn't I wasn't happy. They weren't the best tenant anyways. Thankfully that property's in the process of getting renovated again, and like we're gonna go back on the market and hopefully, fingers crossed, get an awesome tenant, a way better tenant. But like that's just some of the things. So, and the other thing that we practice is like walls out renovation. And what that means is it doesn't mean that you're gonna gut renovate the property. It just means that, hey, look, like I'm gonna do walls out renovation. So everything from the drywall out, I'm gonna cut, get rid of it, and essentially like it's gonna be new, right? And the biggest thing for me is like the plumbing, right? Because stuff gets down there, especially when you buy a distressed property. It is gonna be nasty. It's gonna be disgusting. Like it's gonna be like not cool, right? Like if you're doing some of this work, you're gonna be like, this sucks. Um, anyways, like so I think that I do walls out renovation mainly because of the plumbing. So I'll take out all the cabinets, take out all the plumbing, walls out, clean out the pipes, and then put in new P traps, put in new cabinets, put in new tile, everything. Because then like then I'm going back less to the property, right? So let's say I don't replace all the toilets, right? Then a tenant calls me and they're like, hey, the toilet's leaking, or calls the property manager and the toilet's leaking. Okay, send a plumber out there. It's $120, right? Like just to go out there and fix this toilet. Then maybe the next month, like the next toilet starts leaking, right? Like then it's another $120, right? Versus like, hey, look, just spend the $150, get a decent toilet and replace it. And then that way it eliminates you going back, because every little bit that you go back for, either sending a contractor or your property manager, it's costing you money, right? Like every little bit adds up. It costs you money. So that's why I do walls out renovation. It eliminates that the amount of times that we have to go back to a property. And what it does too is like when you present all the information to the appraiser, they will appraise it as a C2 level property, right? So like C1 is obviously new construction. C5 is just like terrible, like nasty. You're probably going to buy it as a C3, C4 anyways. But like, like your goal is to get it as close to new construction as possible. At least for me, that's just my thing. Just so that it eliminates the amount of time that you go back to the property. So those are just some of the reasons and some of the things that I recommend when doing the construction process and how to do the construction process, right? So just to recap, find a great contractor. They're going to walk you through it. Again, cry once so that you hire the best contractor first. Not the most expensive necessarily, but like the best one that you feel most comfortable with. And you're going to do walls out remodeling. You're going to replace things. You're going to look for tips and tricks that, will help you save money, but also look good and feel good. And then, like just document every single thing. That's just like the main piece of advice I can give you is document every single thing during your flips, during your BRRRRs, during any part of your investing career. Just document it, because it's always going to come back to where you're like, hey, I remember when I used this. Let me go look at my notes and see what I did. Right. So there you have it. Again, I'm Brandon LeCaren. Thank you guys so much for watching. Next step, we'll cover renting your BRRRR and how to manage that process and how to go through it. Again, I'm Brandon LeCaren. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.